just going to kick things off by actually introducing myself. I'll be moderating this panel for about the next hour or so. My name is Dylan Nettles. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the ACLU of Alabama. I am a member, as well as our organization, of course, is of the Alabama Voting Rights Coalition. And the ACLU is also a member of Alabama Forward, the table. So we're really excited to be a part of the event here this morning. It's been great to see so many familiar faces, lots of other Voting Rights Coalition members that I see around, lots more that I want to be a part of the Voting Rights Coalition here in Alabama, and just some great folks to connect with. So I hope you all are doing the same. We're going to allow them to kick things off by just giving us a general introduction about themselves, the work that they do, and what really brought them even maybe into their work and the organizations that they're a part of. So.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased to be here today. My name is Richard Fording. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And I teach and conduct research in the area of U.S. public policy, especially policies related to voting rights and especially voting rights in the South. But I'm here today representing a project that I co-direct called Return My Vote. And so I'll just tell you a little bit about that briefly. Return My Vote is a project that's located within an organization called Greater Birmingham Ministries, which maybe you've heard of. And so my partners are in the voter education and outreach sort of part of that organization. And what we do is we specialize in voting rights restoration for people in Alabama who have felony convictions. And if you know anything about that, you know that there are a lot of people in Alabama who are affected by that, who are disenfranchised. And you may also know that Alabama's process for getting your voting rights back is especially convoluted, confusing, and probably I would feel comfortable saying partly by design. And so what we do is we provide free consultations for anyone who wishes to contact us. And those consultations consist of being able to look somebody's record up and provide them with detailed information about their current status and what it's going to take to get their voting rights back if that's what they need to do. We provide hands-on assistance with that throughout the entire process. And it's free. And we receive, of course, support from Greater Birmingham Ministries, the University of Alabama, and we have students who assist us.
So first of all, I'll just start out by saying that the League of Women Voters has over 100 years of existence, and it was founded as the 19th Amendment was being ratified, and it was sort of handed off from the suffragists to a new organization, which was the League of Women Voters. And if today, when you look at the League of Women Voters, it's considered a tri-federated organization, which means that you've got three basically operationally autonomous organizations that are all linked together by our positions, our mission. We work hand in hand. The National League is focused on the national issues, and then they pull on the state and local leagues to help them get the messages out, to implement projects that are nationwide projects, like the Fair Maps was one that we had recently. Then you look at the state level, and we're focused on state level type issues. We have a C3 and a C4 organization, and so the C3 organization is focused on voter education, voter services. We do a lot of educational forums, but let me just say from where I got started is in 2017, I was the vice president of programs for my daughter's high school, and that was when I realized that they were not registering the high school seniors while they were in their senior year. So working with the AP Gov teacher, we set up voter drives, and there were several women that I knew, in the aftermath of the presidential election. We were all trying to find ways to get involved, and so we set up a voter drive that we held it at 3 high schools at one time on one day in April, which was the day after Governor Ivey had announced the special Senate election, just happened to be that day. And so after that, we realized that we needed something more formal. I live in Huntsville. And so I started looking and doing research, and I connected with the League of Women Voters, and we founded the Tennessee Valley League based on that meeting and that event. And so the rest of it is basically history. For 5 years, that's how I got involved with the league.
Hi everyone, Zach Hobbs. I work with the SPLC as a data analyst. What that all basically boils down to is I support their voting rights team and assist with efforts when it comes to demographic analysis, drawing maps, redistricting, all that kind of fun stuff. For those that aren't familiar, the SPLC is basically a large organization here in the South that is dedicated to dismantling white supremacy and breaking down many of the institutional structures that have hindered human rights here in the Deep South for decades upon decades. So we're generally trying to work and help cultivate things like democratic norms and democracy here in the Deep South. As for myself and how I got involved specifically in this work, back in the day when I was in graduate school, I was doing a lot of work with environmental issues, and oftentimes that would come down to, let's go look at this referendum and see how people voted and try to understand how does that manifest, how does that tie into voting patterns. Well, I started to do a lot of spatial work, and one thing kind of led to another. Skill sets started to get developed, and this coincided with the general decline that we saw in democratic norms, both at a state and federal level over the last roughly decade or so. So I'm developing all these skills, kind of watching democracy on the decline, and that kind of got me really concerned about where's the country going? What is our history actually going to look like? There's this long talk about the arc of history. It's going to tilt towards justice. Well, for a long time now, it's been kind of concerning. Is it actually going to hold to that front? So I was really interested in trying to get involved in some way to kind of directly impact and really kind of help push back and start making sure democracy and justice are protected. So saw an opportunity with the SPLC, and I took it, and here I am today. Very happy to be in this fight.
Can you explain a little bit why the data analytics work you do specifically is so critical in this overall fight we are in around voting rights right now?
There's a lot of different reasons that you're going to see data become important. So for those of you still in school and you're like, oh man, I don't want to do statistics, trust me, it's going to pay off. It's really important, really useful. Why is that? Well, let's look at this from the perspective of litigation. If you want to find where the people that are suffering most are, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. You can try to canvass, you can try to communicate with people, but sometimes there's just a lack of communication, right? People don't know you're out there, or there's issues that just aren't on your purview. A lot of small towns here in Alabama, for example, have significant racial justice issues, but you never hear about them because it's not as exciting as hearing what's going on in Huntsville, what's going on in Montgomery, what's going on in Birmingham. So data is a really useful way to kind of help hone in and start figuring out where you need to look. So you take an example that's not necessarily voting rights related, but is something that helps some of my colleagues at the center. If you want to understand issues with incarceration and where communities are struggling particularly with that, you can look at the data that's publicly available. There's the Department of Corrections, there's data from the census. It can help you zone in. Instead of kind of wandering around searching from county to county, you can really figure in where you can best allocate your resources. So data is very much a tool for exploration and identifying opportunities.
You keep hearing Kathy and I mention Alabama Voting Rights Coalition. Just so you know, we are a statewide coalition, a nonpartisan organization of grassroots advocates, civic engagement, and arts organizations, policy and legal strategists, whose mission is to protect, expand, and restore access to the ballot for all Alabamians. And one of the leading priority issues that we've been working on this session is fighting House Bill 209, which is a really dangerous piece of legislation that was introduced in this session, but it's not exactly a new attempt at voter suppression. We've seen similar legislation across the country, and you all, I'm sure, are well aware that we are fighting against a slew of voter suppression tactics all across the country, even down to the most local levels. But House Bill 209 is one that's really a threat even as we go into the final day of legislative session, which will be this coming Tuesday. So Kathy, why don't you tell us a bit more about House Bill 209, kind of how we got to this point and the impact that it could have?
We have been able to get amendments made to the bill which would remove the criminalization of asking for help by disabled and blind, disabled, and those who cannot read or write. That was a major accomplishment, and the only reason the state did it was because they realized that they were in violation of federal law. There is still a lot of problems with HB 209, and we need this bill to be defeated. And I'll just tell you a couple of more remaining issues that are not, unless this bill is defeated, we're going to have big problems with helping people with absentee voting. So with this bill right now, the way it's written, if you offer help, one of our volunteers offers help to someone who is not blind, or they're poor, or they're in prison, if you offer help, assistance with ordering, completing, making sure the form is accurate, then you're going to be guilty of a misdemeanor. When I looked up the penalties for a misdemeanor, it still includes hard labor, at least 30 days in jail at a county jail. So that's one problem. The other problem, and the good news is that because of the amendments, it is okay for a person who is handicapped or illiterate to ask for help. But that is the only exception. The other part of the bill, which is problematic, is if you knowingly receive or provide payment for assistance with absentee voting, then you're going to be guilty of a felony. And it's a Class B or C felony, which have severe prison sentences involved in Alabama. And this is an outrageous provision. Some of the examples that I have been given is, for example, if you're a grandparent and you've asked your grandchild to go give them a few dollars to go either obtain an absentee application or to go drop it off in the mailbox, then you will be guilty. Both parties would be guilty of a felony.
One of the things that I also think is a horrific irony of all of this, and I think the panelists will agree with me, is that, we are in the 10-year anniversary of the Shelby v. Holder decision. It'll come up just at the end of this month. And that decision really set off the chain of events, a real pattern that we've seen of state legislatures, including Alabama's especially, introducing these voter suppression bills that have slowly but surely curtailed our access to the ballot in some really kind of sly and insidious ways, like what Kathy has described. And I think it's important to be clear that what we're seeing with this bill, with House Bill 209 especially, all this talk about absentee ballots and ballot harvesting, is a continuation of the type of election denialism and anti-democratic fear tactics that we've seen since the 2020 election. But we all know this here in Alabama. It's old news, right? This is not new to us at all. And I say often that our work here in Alabama is a continuation of the legacy of the folks who have been doing this. This is, I say, in our DNA. And so we're going to continue to fight this bill, House Bill 209. We have one day of the legislative session left on Tuesday, as I mentioned, and it really still could pass, you all, on that final day. So we have to be diligent right up until that gavel falls at the final minute of the session.